The budgets could be prepared by using the traditional ways as it has been practiced for many years in the past, or the budgets could be prepared by using unorthodox or the alternative ways. In this segment, we are going to look at some of the traditional budgeting types and their characteristics. Okay, so the first traditional type of the budgets the organizations usually prepare are called as fixed budgets. Sometimes they are called as periodic budgets as well. Then incremental budgets. And last but not the least, participatory budgets or bottom-up budgets. Now we're going to look at some of the salient features of fixed, incremental, and participatory budgets. Okay, fixed or periodic budgets. Now, the word fixed is about the level of activity, that these budgets are prepared at single level of activity, which is fixed for the entire year. So right at the beginning of the budget period, which could be on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, right at the beginning of the budget period, the organization assumes one level of activity, and that target is given to the managers for implementation. This single level of activity remains unchanged throughout the period, meaning the management doesn't want to change this level of activity. So any targets set at the beginning of the year reported to the managers remain unchanged. Some of the advantages of the fixed or periodic budgets: they are less time consuming, okay, because they are prepared at the beginning of the year and only one level of activity is assumed, so therefore these do not take much time to develop. They are quite useful in stable environment. You might have noticed that if the budgets are prepared for a single level of activity, or even budgets are fixed for a period of time, let's say 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, they would only be relevant to the organization if the organization in the market, if the environment in the market or the economy is stable and the management can fairly predict that this level of activity will not change in the budget period. Now, the disadvantages or the cons, of course, opposite to the stable environment, these budgets may not be appropriate for a fluctuating environment. So if there are fluctuations in the environment, then these budgets will not be very relevant to the organization. Okay. These are unsuitable for comparison purposes, because I think you are familiar with something called as budgeting for control, when we compare the actual results with the budgets and then the budgets are flexed in order to be in line with the actual results. So as the fixed budgets are prepared for one level of activity which may differ from the actual activity or actual results, so therefore these do not create a comparison of like with like. Okay, incremental budgets. As the name on the tin, the starting point of the incremental budget is to take figures from the last year's budget or actual results. And what do we have to do? Increment. We adjust the above figures for known changes, meaning we add or subtract any of the known changes to the last year's figures. And then after this plus and minus process, we end up with the traditional budget. So keeping in mind what could be the known changes which we may update in the last year's figures. So it could be, let's suppose, the level of activity or sales. Last year we sold X number of units. We might be going to sell 10% more next year. Or it could be inflation levels. Every year inflation may change, so we update last year results, that if we spent X amount of money last year, The next year we are going to spend, let's say, 5 or 10% more or 5 or 10% less in case, or if there are any efficiency levels being changed, or there could be other as well, like which can be predicted or predictable by the management, like foreign exchange rates or any other wastage levels, etc. The advantage of the incremental budgets is it's a quicker way to budgeting, because all we have to do is we already have the figures from the last year and we just need to update in order to bring it to the next year budget. They're quite useful when the changes can be predicted, because the whole emphasis is on the unknown changes. But as these changes may happen over the period of time repeatedly, therefore it is useful. We can predict them fairly easily, and then we can update our previous year figures. They're quite useful in stable conditions. You might have noticed that many industries are stable over the years and years and years, and therefore they can be a bit more relevant to the organization. For example, if I think about these ice cream producing companies, they know that summer is gonna come every year. Okay, so I'm not saying that they won't have any changes next year, but because of course summer will always come every year, so they know that during the summer season they have to produce more and more, so those activity levels can be adjusted in the budget periods. Okay, some of the disadvantages: risk of past inefficiencies. So because incremental budget is like this, we pick up the figures from the last year and then we add any of the known changes, add or deduct known changes, and that equals to the budget for the next year. So if last year we made some mistakes or there were inefficiencies, they are going to be brought forward to the next year. So that's a huge risk that any wrongdoing last year may be repeated next year. No incentive for cost reduction, because all we do is update with the inflation or any currency exchange rates, etc., etc. Focus is not on the cost control. Participatory or bottom-up budgets, as the name on the tin, the participatory budgets are produced with the help of the or participation of the junior management. So it involves junior managers in budget preparation. Junior or departmental managers provide their input into the budgeting process. So it's not like senior management is going to impose something, but senior management asks the managers at departmental level to provide their input, what they want to spend and how much they want to spend in the future. These inputs are sent to top management for review or approval, and if management feels all these budgets or these figures are reasonable enough, they approve. If not, they challenge and they ask the departmental managers to justify. It's a quicker way to budgeting to some extent. Okay. Motivation for managers. Motivation for managers may be like, if let's suppose we are going to impose any budgeting process on the managers, like do this and do that, we are not going to ask the managers, then probably managers will not be motivated enough. But if we ask them what you really want to achieve, what target you want to set for the future, they feel like we are passing the business ownership to them. So they feel like motivated, that they are participating in the decision making or planning of the organization. Improved coordination between departments, because they know how different activities work within the departments, so managers can coordinate within within their departments in order to set realistic budgets. There are some disadvantages as well, such as more time consuming, okay, which is opposite to the advantages. It may not be a quicker way to budgeting, more time consuming. Risk of budget slacks. Risk of budget slacks means that managers may like to overstate expenditures, because if you will ask managers how much he or she would like to spend, they may like to spend more money. They may like to overstate costs. And lack of experience. Sometimes asking managers what they want to spend and how much they want to spend, and if they don't have experience, they may actually provide inappropriate feedback to the budgeting process.